Body armor. 42% of Marines killed from torso wounds died from injuries that better armor would have stopped. The Pentagon knew. They had the armor. They banned it. 2006. Ramadi. A Marine takes fire from a rooftop sniper. The bullet enters through the gap under his arm, exactly where rigid ceramic plates don't cover. He bleeds out before the medevac arrives. Dragon skin was designed to cover that gap. Dragon skin was banned 3 months earlier. The Army said dragon skin failed testing, but the timing and the contracts tell a different story. Dragon skin wasn't perfect. It was heavier, expensive, and had its own unresolved questions. But whether it ever got a fair chance, that's where the story gets complicated. For 30 years, the Pentagon spent $2.5 billion on body armor systems that kept failing. Systems so heavy, troops collapsed from heat stroke in Iraqi deserts. Ceramic plates that cracked before soldiers ever saw combat. Fraud so deep, the CEO manufacturing defective armor went to prison while soldiers wore his vests in combat. And when operators started buying dragon skin with their own money, armor operators trusted, the system moved to shut it out as billion-dollar contracts kept rolling. This is the story of $2.5 billion wasted, $10 million stolen by executives, and the armor system that passed federal certification before the Pentagon made it disappear. To understand how the Pentagon built a $2.5 billion disaster while banning the alternative, we need to start 50 years earlier in Korea. Korea, 1952. The M1952 flak jacket became America's first standardized body armor. 8.5 pounds of ballistic nylon stopped 75% of artillery fragments. Against rifle rounds, 24%, barely 1 in 4. The flak jacket addressed the primary threat, artillery and mortars, but the limitation would become fatal once the threat changed. Vietnam proved this brutally. The M69 continued the ballistic nylon philosophy, effective against fragments, useless against AK-47 rounds. VC and NVA infantry carried rifles as primary weapons. 1968. Hue City. A Marine takes multiple AK rounds to the chest during house-to-house fighting. The M69 vest stops nothing. His body armor becomes a burial shroud. The after-action report notes, body armor provided no protection against rifle fire. The Pentagon filed the report and kept issuing M69s for 3 more years. Troops wore 8 pounds of gear that provided negligible protection against the actual threat. The Pentagon knew soft armor couldn't stop rifle rounds without becoming prohibitively heavy. The technology to create rifle-rated body armor existed in laboratories, but practical fielding was years away. The data was clear in after-action analyses. The Pentagon kept issuing the same vests anyway. 1983 brought the Kevlar revolution, PASGT, Personnel Armor System for Ground Troops. 9 pounds for the vest. The material itself was extraordinary. Kevlar, a synthetic fiber 5 times stronger than steel by weight, woven into fabric that dispersed bullet energy across wider surface area. The PASGT vest provided protection roughly equivalent to NIJ Level 2A. It stopped 9mm, 45 ACP, 357 Magnum at moderate velocities. For peacekeeping and low-intensity conflicts, this represented a genuine capability leap. Soldiers could survive pistol threats that would have killed them in earlier armor. Against rifle threats, still inadequate. 7.62 by 39 AK rounds and 7.62 NATO punched straight through Kevlar soft armor. PASGT worked brilliantly for the threats it was designed against. It wasn't designed against rifles. This was the pattern emerging. Each generation solved one problem and revealed the next limitation. 1996 brought ISAPO, Interim Small Arms Protective Overvest, hard ceramic trauma plates inserted into pouches worn over the PASGT vest. The plates added 16.5 pounds on top of the 9-pound vest, 25.1 pounds total. The ceramic plates shattered on impact, absorbing and dispersing rifle bullet energy through controlled fracturing. The PASGT ISAPO combination achieved Level 3 protection. It could stop 7.62 NATO rifle rounds. Soldiers survived hits that would have killed them in Kevlar alone. Troops hated it. 25 pounds concentrated on the torso restricted movement, caused chronic back injuries, and created severe heat retention. The Army's own evaluation called ISAPO unacceptably cumbersome, but it worked. The lesson was clear. Stopping rifle rounds required hard plates. The question became how to make hard plate armor practical for sustained operations. The Pentagon thought ISAPO solved the rifle protection problem. They were wrong. The weight made it unusable for real combat conditions. ISAPO proved hard plates worked. The next program tried to make them practical. Development of the Interceptor system began in 1998. The concept was modular scalability. Soldiers could add or remove protection based on threat level. Point-blank body armor won the initial contracts. Production started in 2000. The Interceptor had two designations. IBA meant Interceptor Body Armor. OTV meant Outer Tactical Vest. Same system, different terminology depending on which service used it. The base OTV carrier weighed 8.4 pounds. Soft armor, comparable to Level 3A, providing pistol protection similar to PASGT. Then came ESAPI plates, small arms protective insert, front and back ceramic plates, 4 pounds each. With plates installed, total weight 16.4 pounds. On paper, this looked like the perfect solution, 9 pounds lighter than ISAPO, while providing Level 4 protection against armor-piercing rifle rounds. The Pentagon had finally created practical, rifle-rated armor. Iraq, 2003, proved the paper wrong. 16.4 pounds was the absolute minimum configuration. Front and back plates only. No side protection, no collar, no shoulder guards, no groin protector, just the basics. Combat doesn't happen on paper. Troops immediately started adding components. ESAPI side plates, 3 pounds for the pair. Enhanced ESAPI plates in some configurations. Deltoid protectors for shoulders, roughly 1 pound total. Collar and throat guard, 1 pound. Groin protector, another pound. Load-bearing pouches for magazines, grenades, radios, medical gear. Fully configured, Interceptor topped 30 pounds. Some soldiers reported setups exceeding 33 pounds, depending on pouch loadout and accessories. Think about that weight. 33 pounds on the torso, in 130-degree Iraqi heat, wearing full combat loads that included M4 rifle, 210 rounds of ammunition, water, helmet, and assault pack. Total combat weight exceeded 80 pounds before any mission-specific gear. August 2004, heat casualties were climbing. Soldiers were collapsing during routine patrols. LA Times documented troops removing armor mid-mission during fighting in Najaf because the weight made sustained movement impossible in extreme heat. The armor meant to save lives was forcing a choice: wear it and risk heat stroke, or remove it and risk getting shot. Neither option should exist. The Pentagon knew troops were dumping armor. They kept issuing the same system. Then, the forensic data arrived that changed everything. January 7, 2006. The New York Times published a Marine Corps study analyzing combat deaths in Iraq. The conclusion was devastating. 42% of Marines killed from torso wounds died from injuries to areas that improved side and underarm armor coverage could have protected. Not a marginal finding. 42%. Nearly half of all torso fatalities were preventable with better coverage design. The Interceptor was engineered for Cold War doctrine, frontal threats, troops facing forward across open terrain. Iraq wasn't that battlefield. IEDs detonated from the side. Snipers fired from elevated positions. Insurgents ambushed from perpendicular angles. The gaps under the arms and along the lower sides became kill zones. Rigid ceramic plates don't conform to body curves. Where plates didn't overlap, bullets bypassed armor entirely. Marine Corps Systems Command issued a solicitation for OTV redesign in November 2005, requesting improvements to side ballistic protection and lower back coverage. They'd identified the fatal design flaws. The forensic data showed exactly where Marines were dying. And while that solicitation was active, they kept ordering more interceptors with the same coverage gaps. The evidence was in front of them. Procurement didn't change. But the coverage gaps weren't the only failure. ESAPI plates, Enhanced Small Arms Protective Insert. These replaced the original SAPI plates starting in 2004. Ceramic plates rated level 4, capable of stopping 30-caliber armor-piercing rounds. In 2004, the Pentagon awarded SAPI contracts worth $1.9 billion across multiple manufacturers. Point Blank received the largest share, over $764 million in 2005 alone. $1.9 billion. For ceramic discs. Ceramics are inherently brittle. The material defeats bullets through controlled fracturing. The ceramic shatters on impact, dispersing bullet energy across the plate structure. This is by design. And without proper coatings, shattered plates create spalling. Ceramic fragments fly upward into the soldier's throat and chin. The armor that saves you from the bullet can still wound you from the shrapnel it creates. But ceramics also crack from mechanical stress unrelated to ballistic impact. Soldiers reported discovering cracked plates during routine inspections, plates that hadn't been shot, plates that cracked from being set down on hard surfaces, bounced around in vehicle cargo areas, or subjected to repeated thermal cycling in desert environments. A cracked ceramic plate provides inconsistent protection. Fracture lines create structural weak points where bullets can penetrate more easily. Worse, soldiers often couldn't detect cracks visually without removing the plate from its fabric sleeve. Troops might carry damaged plates into combat without knowing it. 2010, the Army recalled 13,400 ESAPI plates manufactured by Armor Works for beveled edges that didn't meet specifications. These plates represented roughly 9% of Armor Works' 150,000 plate contract. 13,400 plates issued to soldiers. The Army never disclosed which units received defective plates or whether any soldiers were shot while wearing them. They knew about the defects. They recalled the plates. They didn't explain what happened before the recall. Then came the contractor fraud. May 2005, the Marine Corps recalled 5,277 Interceptor vests from Point Blank body armor. Ballistic testing revealed multiple complete penetrations of 9mm rounds through vests supposed to stop pistol threats. These weren't new vests in the factory. These were fielded vests. Marines wore them in Iraq and Afghanistan. November 2005. The Army and Marine Corps recalled 18,425 additional body armor sets from Point Blank for failing ballistic criteria. Total recalled from one contractor, 23,702 vests. Late 2004, Army ballistic experts had warned Point Blank about test failures. The company knew their armor was failing government testing. They kept manufacturing. The Pentagon kept accepting deliveries and issuing the vests to troops. Point Blank held the $1.9 billion ESAPI plate contract while their vests were being recalled for ballistic failures. In 2005 alone, while recall orders were being typed, the Pentagon wired Point Blank nearly $800 million. The checks kept clearing, even as the armor kept failing. October 2007. David Brooks, CEO of DHB Industries, Point Blank's parent company, was federally indicted. Securities fraud, accounting manipulation, insider trading, obstruction of justice. Brooks had personally stolen over $10 million from the company while it held multi-billion-dollar military contracts, spending it on armored vehicles, diamond belt buckles, and lavish parties, all while soldiers wore his defective armor in combat. September 2010. Brooks was convicted. The parent company had engaged in pervasive accounting fraud to artificially inflate earnings and stock price while delivering substandard armor that failed ballistic requirements. But the fraud wasn't discovered by Army quality control. It was exposed by a whistleblower, a Point Blank employee who reported the ballistic test failures to the Department of Defense Inspector General. The company retaliated. The employee employee was fired. And during the investigation, Point Blank kept shipping defective vests to Iraq and Afghanistan. The Pentagon kept accepting them. Soldiers kept wearing them. How many troops were shot while wearing armor that failed government testing? The Army won't release casualty data linked to specific vest serial numbers. We know 23,000 vests were recalled. We know soldiers reported bullets penetrating armor rated to stop those rounds. The rest is classified. The fraud went deeper than one executive stealing millions. The entire supply chain was compromised. Chinese counterfeit body armor entered the U.S. military procurement system. The full scale remains partially classified, but federal prosecutions reveal the pattern clearly. 2019, Ramin Kohanbash was sentenced for importing $20 million in counterfeit Chinese military equipment, including at least 13,332 fake jackets detectable by enemy night vision, and 18,597 non-flame-resistant hoods marketed as fire-resistant. The counterfeits weren't obvious fakes. They carried correct labels, correct lot numbers, correct NSN stock codes. They entered through subcontractors who sourced materials from Chinese manufacturers to cut costs. The fake Kevlar looked identical to real Kevlar. It weighed the same. Only ballistic testing revealed the difference, and that testing happened after the armor shipped to troops. Federal prosecutions revealed millions in counterfeit equipment entered supply chains. The Cohen-Bosch case alone involved $20 million. How much reached combat zones? How many soldiers wore fake armor without knowing? Those numbers remain classified. If local police departments received counterfeit armor through legitimate supply chains, what prevented it from reaching deployed troops? Nothing. The question isn't whether counterfeit equipment reached combat zones, it's how much, and whether any soldiers were killed wearing fake armor. The Pentagon won't release those numbers. Every level of the Interceptor program was broken. Weight caused heat casualties. Coverage gaps caused preventable deaths. Ceramic plates cracked. Contractor committed fraud. Counterfeit equipment infiltrated supply. Soldiers were dying from torso wounds that better armor would have stopped. At this point, the problem wasn't lack of technology. It was what the Pentagon chose to buy. 2005, Pinnacle Armor introduced Dragon Skin. The name came from its appearance. Overlapping ceramic discs, arranged like reptile scales, bonded to flexible Kevlar backing. The design philosophy was revolutionary. Traditional ceramic plates shatter on impact. One hit, one compromised zone. Dragon Skin used overlapping discs where each disc was independent. Multi-hit capability in the same impact zone without catastrophic failure. The flexibility could address the coverage problem killing Marines, if the armor proved reliable under all combat conditions. Rigid plates create gaps at body joints, shoulders, sides, underarms. Dragon Skin conformed to the body, maintaining continuous coverage while flexing with movement. Pinnacle marketed the SOV 2000 and SOV 3000 models. The 3000 provided level 4 protection across the entire torso, including sides and underarms, without the gaps that rigid plates created. Special operations units noticed immediately. By 2005, operators were purchasing Dragon Skin with personal funds or discretionary unit budgets. These are people whose survival depends on equipment performance. They chose Dragon Skin over Interceptor when given the option. The system wasn't cheap. $5,000 per soldier compared to Interceptor's $1,100, but operators didn't care about cost. They cared about coverage and multi-hit performance. Between 2005 and 2007, Dragon Skin passed Air Force testing at Aberdeen Proving Ground, National Institute of Justice Federal Certification for Level 3 protection, and NBC field testing that showed Dragon Skin outperforming Interceptor on multi-hit capability. Special operators bought it with personal funds. Then came the Army's tests, and they told a very different story. They banned dragon skin before testing it. The order came in March 2006. Soldiers could not buy it with personal funds. Units could not procure it through discretionary budgets. The official justification? Dragon skin did not meet Army specifications. The ban came 4 months before the Army conducted their own testing. When Army tests in May 2006 showed failures under extreme heat, 160 degrees Fahrenheit, until adhesive bonding failed, the controversy exploded. Pinnacle argued the conditions exceeded operational reality and questioned whether the tests were designed to produce failure. The Army maintained their protocols were legitimate and necessary for combat reliability. And which version had they tested? Pinnacle had multiple models with different adhesives. The SOV-2000 used different bonding than the SOV-3000. The Army never clearly specified which exact variant they tested. When National Institute of Justice certification contradicted Army results, the certification got revoked. Dragonskin passed NIJ certification in December 2006. The certification process specifically requires manufacturers to demonstrate performance over warranty periods under environmental stress. NIJ certified the Dragonskin met federal requirements. 8 months later, the Department of Justice and NIJ revoked that certification, claiming insufficient evidence of long-term performance. What changed in 8 months? The armor was the same. The testing protocols were the same. The only thing different was timing. When NBC News conducted independent field testing showing dragon skin stopping multiple rifle rounds in the same impact area, while interceptor plates failed after single hits, the Army released classified test data publicly. NBC's technical expert reversed his position after being confronted with Army data and questions from lawmakers. The network's investigation collapsed. When Senators Hillary Clinton and Jim Webb demanded Government Accountability Office investigation into the competing test results, the GAO published a broader body armor report in 2007, but it didn't definitively resolve the dragon skin controversy. If findings exist, they remain classified. The timeline reveals the pattern. Dragon skin certified by NIJ in December 2006, the Army awards massive IOTV contracts to Point Blank and Specialty Defense Systems in May 2007. 75,000 vests to Point Blank, 155,000 to Specialty Defense. NIJ revokes dragon skin certification in August 2007, right as those contracts finalize. These contracts were signed while senators were demanding investigations, while NBC was broadcasting tests showing interceptor failures, while the dragon skin controversy dominated military news coverage. The Pentagon committed to buying 230,000 interceptor replacement vests from established contractors, while simultaneously fighting to destroy the banned alternative's credibility. Follow the money. Point Blank received $764.8 million in contracts during 2005 alone, while their vests were being recalled for life-threatening failures. Pinnacle Armor had no such procurement relationships. They were an outside company with no existing contracts threatening a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem. If dragon skin became standard issue, Point Blank lost revenue. Specialty Defense lost contracts. The entire interceptor supply chain faced potential obsolescence. The question becomes unavoidable. Did the Army ban dragon skin because it genuinely failed legitimate testing? Or did they design tests specifically to produce failure and protect existing contracts? The circumstantial evidence is overwhelming. Dragon skin passed Air Force tests at Aberdeen, passed NIJ federal certification, passed NBC independent field testing, failed Army tests using extreme environmental protocols on potentially obsolete versions. Then NIJ revoked certification 8 months later for reasons that contradicted their original approval. Colonel James McGee, USMC retired, former president of Point Blank Body Armor, made a stunning public statement in September 2006. Quote, "Dragon skin is hands down the best body armor out there by 2 generations." Unquote. Read that again. The former president of the company manufacturing Interceptor stated Dragon skin was 2 generations ahead of his own product. The man who ran Point Blank said Dragon skin was revolutionary. Then the Army banned it and kept buying from Point Blank. Multiple sources reported that elite protective details guarding high-ranking generals wore dragon skin despite the Army prohibition. If dragon skin was truly unreliable and dangerous as Army tests claimed, why would anyone protecting generals risk their lives with it? The pattern is clear. The Army needed dragon skin to fail. The contracts depended on it. Point Blank had billion-dollar agreements. Specialty Defense had massive orders. The entire Interceptor supply and manufacturing infrastructure existed to produce rigid plate systems. Dragon skin threatened all of it by being fundamentally different. Flexible overlapping discs versus rigid plates. Multi-hit versus single-hit. Continuous coverage versus gaps. The Pentagon tested dragon skin under extreme conditions, declared it failed, banned it from theater, and when NIJ certification contradicted them, the certification got revoked. The soldiers who wanted dragon skin had no voice. The operators buying it with personal funds were prohibited. The forensic data showing 42% of Marine torso deaths were preventable with better coverage became irrelevant to procurement decisions. Dragon skin directly addressed the very coverage gaps showing up in Marine autopsies, and its overlapping discs were designed for true multi-hit protection. The data was clear. They still chose contractors over soldiers. 2007. The Army began fielding the Improved Outer Tactical Vest, IOTV. This was the official Interceptor replacement addressing some failures. Weight reduction, 3 pounds lighter than OTV. The IOTV weighed roughly 26 pounds fully loaded, compared to Interceptor's 30+. Coverage improvements, 52 additional square inches of lower back protection, partially addressing the side and back coverage gaps. Quick release mechanisms improved. Better load distribution through improved strap and cummerbund systems. The IOTV was better than Interceptor, incrementally. It still used rigid ceramic plates, still had some coverage gaps, still concentrated significant weight on the torso. The IOTV came in multiple generations with minor improvements. Generation 3 cost $791 per system. From 2007 through 2014, the Army procured 1.7 million IOTVs, approximately $1.3 billion in vest procurement alone, not counting ceramic plates contracted separately. But the fundamental problems remained. Soldiers still reported heat casualties in Iraq and Afghanistan. The rigid plate design still created gaps at body curves where dragon skin's flexible discs would have provided coverage. The Army had banned the solution, then spent over $1 billion buying incremental improvements to the failed system. 2016 brought the modular scalable vest, 5 pounds lighter than IOTV when fully loaded, 26% lighter than previous IOTV generations, better modularity allowing soldiers to configure protection levels based on mission requirements. The MSV became standard issue in 2018, approximately 25 pounds fully loaded compared to Interceptor's 30+ pounds. After 15 years and multiple billions spent, the Army arrived at a vest 5 pounds lighter than where they started. The MSV still uses rigid ceramic plates, still has some coverage limitations at body joints and curves, but it represents the best rigid plate system the Pentagon has fielded. The MSV emphasizes improved side and underarm coverage, better weight distribution, enhanced mobility, the exact problems dragon skin was designed to solve a decade earlier. The Army banned the flexible disc solution, then spent a decade and billions developing rigid plate systems that addressed similar issues through different engineering. They eventually arrived at solutions, just 10 years late and several $1 billion more expensive. The question remains, how many Marines died in that gap between banning dragon skin and fielding the MSV? How many torso deaths in Iraq and Afghanistan between 2007 and 2018 occurred in coverage gaps that dragon skin would have protected. Those numbers are classified. The Pentagon won't release casualty data that could prove dragon skin's ban cost lives. So after 60 years, billions of dollars, and countless preventable deaths, the pattern is undeniable. The Pentagon consistently chose contracts over capability. The human cost? 42% of Marine torso deaths potentially preventable with better coverage design. A Marine bleeding out in Hawei City wearing a vest rated only for fragments. Heat casualties from excessive armor weight in Iraqi deserts. Soldiers wearing cracked plates without knowing protection was compromised. Troops removing armor mid-patrol to avoid heat stroke. 23,000 defective vests issued to troops while the CEO spent stolen money on diamond belt buckles. Unknown numbers of soldiers wearing Chinese counterfeit armor that looked real but failed ballistically. And a superior armor system banned to protect contracts, while Marines died in coverage gaps for another decade. All preventable, all documented, all ignored. Was dragon skin actually inferior under realistic combat conditions? Or were the tests designed to produce failure and protect contracts worth billions? The Army maintains their testing was legitimate, and dragon skin failed to meet combat requirements. Critics point to the circumstantial evidence, the timing, the contracts, the test conditions, the certification reversal. Definitive proof remains classified behind Pentagon operational security walls. We know the Army banned armor that passed Air Force tests, passed NIJ federal certification, and that operators preferred when given the choice. We know NIJ revoked that certification 8 months later under circumstances that made no technical sense. We know massive contracts flowed to established manufacturers immediately after the ban. We know generals allegedly wore dragon skin while prohibiting it for soldiers. The circumstantial evidence raises serious questions. The timeline, the contracts, the test discrepancies, the certification revocation, the whistleblower retaliation, the counterfeit infiltration, and the subsequent IOTV and MSV improvements that addressed dragon skin's design advantages all suggest institutional protection of existing relationships may have influenced decisions. But definitive proof remains classified. The Pentagon spent almost $3 billion protecting a flawed system because changing it threatened the wrong people. Soldiers paid with their lives. Executives got rich. Contractors kept contracts despite fraud convictions. Whistleblowers got fired, and the superior alternative got destroyed to preserve the status quo. Every body armor system from Vietnam to Iraq failed soldiers in predictable, preventable ways. The technology existed to fix those failures. The Pentagon chose not to use it. They chose contractors over soldiers. They chose existing contracts over better protection. They chose institutional preservation over lives. 42% of preventable Marine deaths suggests it wasn't worth it. But the Pentagon never answered that question. They classified the data, sealed the investigations, and moved on to the next procurement cycle. The pattern continues because nobody faced consequences. The system that produced this disaster still operates. The contractors still get paid. The procurement process that enabled fraud and waste remains unchanged. And soldiers still wear armor designed by the lowest bidder who maintains the right relationships. That's the $2.5 billion scandal. Not just the money wasted, the lives lost, while the Pentagon protected contractors who failed them.